Set aside what you think you know about castles, about power, privilege, and passion, neatly sorted by class and custom, because tonight we're peeling back the tapestry that divided the Lord's chamber from the servant's shadow world, where nobles sipped wine under painted rafters, servants huddled in the dark, lives ruled by duty and danger. But even in those places, lust stole like smoke through the floorboards, and nothing, not oaths, not iron locks, not all the prayers in the manor could keep a forbidden secret living forever under the stairs. This isn't a tale of chivalry, or of those courtly romances where knights pine for queens across flower-strewn gardens. This is the story of the secret pulse beneath the manor, the stolen looks over the pantry table, the meeting after midnight, by the buttery, the razor-fine edge between privilege and peril. Before we begin, I invite you to settle in. Let the noise of the world drift away. If you've had a long day, you don't need to carry it into this night. These stories are here to calm your thoughts, to guide you through history's forgotten corridors without rush, without judgment. If this journey helps you unwind, sleep, or simply pause the pace of your life for a little while, consider subscribing. Give it a like, and also let me know from where and at what time you are listening it right now. Now, inhale slowly. Let it go. You're safe. You're still. You're here. Let the whisper begin. Because while the songs of the day might celebrate heroic suffering and noble restraint, everyone at court knew that real affairs were as common and as dangerous as fire in a hayloft. Especially when the lines were crossed, when the master of the house set his gaze not on a lady of rank, but on the milkmaid, the chamber servant, or the cook's clever daughter, hiding her blush behind a basket of apples. Why did lords hide their lovers among the servants? It wasn't simply lust or loneliness, though both played their part. For a nobleman, every move was a wager. One misstep could mean scandal, ruin, or even deadly retribution from a jealous wife, a rival, or a bishop with a score to settle. The corridor between desire and disaster could be measured in footsteps. That's why the back stairs mattered so much. The lord who slipped away from the great hall after a feast knew every squeaky board and every candle that must be shielded. The chambermaids, in turn, learned to move like ghosts, never letting their faces betray what they knew or what they'd seen. Knowledge was power, and power, after dark, was often a sentence rather than a shield. Beneath the flagstones, affairs played out in a world both visible and unseen. The manors of England, France, Burgundy, a universe with its own rules and risks, were built as much for control as for comfort. Lords surrounded themselves with layers of servants, not only to show their wealth, but to create a buffer of discretion. When temptation turned to action, when a lord's hand found the wrist of a girl in the storeroom, when a whispered promise was exchanged for silence, the servants' quarters became more than barracks. They became a theatre of risk, a place to hide pleasure and to bury shame. But what happened under those stairs didn't stay hidden forever. Every manor bred its own economy of rumor. The abrupt quiet as the master's boots passed through the scullery at an odd hour. The laughter stilled when a favorite maid was sent on an errand that lasted until dawn. The sudden rewarder, new dress, a handful of coins, or a transfer to the lord's household in a distant shire. Sometimes a favored girl rose in the ranks. More often, she vanished, her name replaced by a new face, and the story circulated in hushed undertones among those who scrubbed the floors and stoked the fires. If you ask the household priest or confessor, he'll quote the scriptures, speak of the soul's war against fleshly temptation. If you ask the steward, he'll warn of household disorder, of the cost to reputation and the risks run when servants talk too much or ask for too much. But ask the servants, the ones who spent their lives seeing and not seeing, smoothing out sheets and hiding so many secrets. They'll tell you the real threat was getting caught. Not just for the Lord, but for them. The punishment for a discovered affair might be dismissal, social death, a whipping, or worse. Sometimes the affair was a badly kept secret, an open joke among the kitchen staff, so long as it didn't threaten the lady's pride or the heir's inheritance. Sometimes it was a scandal that exploded like wildfire, tearing families apart, prompting sudden marriages, hurried confessions, or deadly violence, because a betrayed wife, especially a lady of lineage, could invoke her own power. The shame inflicted by sending a servant girl away in disgrace, or the cold fury of a planned accident on a stair or at the well. You see, in the medieval world, power was a knife held delicately by everyone and trusted to no one. Lords thought they controlled the dangerous gravity of their own desires, but the castle walls had ears, and even secrets hidden in the servants. Quarters could one day become weapons in somebody else's hands. The next time you walk through a ruin and see the worn hollow on a stair or the shadowed entry to the undercroft, imagine the voices that once passed. They're urgent, afraid, eager, or bitter. Affairs hidden beneath the stairs weren't just about love or lust. They were about all the fault lines of a world built on silence and control. When it worked, the secret might buy loyalty or brief happiness. When it failed, it could mean ruin. For everyone involved, tonight, we start our descent into those passages and shuttered chambers where love, power, and betrayal twisted together. We'll walk in the footsteps of a servant girl. Let's call her Cecily, and the Lord who risked everything for the heat of a moment. Behind every closed door, there's a pair of eyes, a heart beating too fast, and a future hinging on two things: secrecy and what happens if no when that secrecy shatters. Are you brave enough to keep following? Then come further into the castle, to the point where hiding and being hidden become the only way to survive for Lord, maid, and every watcher in between. Next, we'll meet the people who lived by these rules and learn how hiding love under the stairs changed not just lives, but the very shape of power. If the castle feels different after midnight, that's because it is. In the daytime, everything is rigid, watched, divided by rules: who eats where, who speaks when, which boots are polished, whose smile you risk returning. But after the torches are snuffed and the last platter set aside, another world begins, the world beneath the stairs. Cecily hears it first in the scrape of the secret latch, the soft hush of the Lord's boots on the back landing. That first touch is never accidental. She's in the linen room folding rough napkins when he appears, voice low, hand closing gently, but firmly on her arm. There's a look, a spark that jumps between fear and something else. Something stronger, and Cecily's heart pounds loud enough to drown out the noise from the great hall above. For all the hunger in the Lord's eyes, there is calculation there too. Cecily is safe in the sense that her silence can be bought with small gifts and subtle threats. Yet everyone in the manor knows that this safety is fleeting, that a lord's pleasure is a favor only until it curdles to inconvenience. For her part, Cecily tells herself that she is in control. She remembers her mother's warnings, the stories traded in whispers during chores. Better to stay invisible, girl, or, if you must be seen, don't ever give away your secrets for free. But life beneath the stairs leaves few options, and the sensation of being chosen, even for a dangerous reason, can blur the line between agency and entrapment. The affair begins with fleeting touches behind cupboards, secret smiles at the well. The Lord makes promises, some empty, some honest, and gives her gifts. A brooch lost at a feast, a ribbon borrowed from the lady's sewing basket. But this isn't a fairy tale, and both of them know it. The secret meetings must be measured like a spice. Too much, and tongues begin to wag. Too little, and the flame risks flickering out. Cecily learns to slip from the dormitory after curfew, to memorize the sequence of steps that creak when she crosses the north wing, to stuff a rag into her mouth when passion or fear rises too high. She knows exactly how far one can walk in the shadow of the tapestries before the steward's rounds begin. But everyone is watching always. In the medieval manor, the servants' quarters are a living organism, each face a cell, each bit of gossip a nerve transmitting danger through the body. The kitchen boy knows when Cecily is missed by the hearth. The chambermaid notes the stains on her skirts and the sudden fatigue the next morning. The older women, the ones with mended hands and hard eyes, look away but make a note of every new trinket pinned to Cecily's shift. A few are jealous, wishing it were them, or angry that now everyone will be scrutinized harder in case this affair draws fire from above. But most are afraid, because everyone knows that when the world turns, it always does, there will be punishment for more than the guilty. Above the servants, suspicion takes on a new edge. The lady of the house may act ignorant at first, trusting in routine, but nothing is truly a secret. She watches the Lord's movements, the changes in intimacy or attitude, how he lingers too long at the kitchens, how his mood swings with each moon. The steward, more interested in keeping order than in preserving any heart, takes pride in his discretion. But even he cannot keep a tight ship if the master's games start to spill over. When he begins moving people between bedrooms, tinkering with duty rosters, everyone pretends not to notice. But the dogs sense it and bark at odd hours, and the old cook mutters that there's a chill in the air these nights. It's not enough to hide body. Cecily and the Lord must hide meaning. To a world obsessed with lineage, every act is loaded with risk. A lord who is careless not only courts scandal, but threatens his wife's pride, endangers the inheritance of his children, and if church and law get involved, risks excommunication or worse. Stories from other houses seep in through the minstrels and visitors. The knight who was run through by a jealous husband, the Lord's favorite sent away in disgrace, the entire manor thrown into chaos when a child is born with a face too much like the master's. Every door has a story, every attic a memory of love turned perilous. And Cecily, each day sharpens her senses, makes her more adept at reading danger. The extra glance from the housekeeper, the new recipe for restorative herbs brewed and forced on the maids each month. She is careful to keep her own body hidden, no stray locks of hair, no stains on the linen, nothing that could betray more than devotion to her work. At the same time, the Lord grows bold. He asks for her in public, compliments her bread too warmly, too often. Above all, he is careless in his need. He lets his eyes linger, and in a world run on silence and implication, that look is as loud as a bell. Inevitably, as the weeks grind on, something shifts. One evening, Cecily finds an anonymous note on her cot, little more than a smear of graphite. "Be careful who sees you." She knows at once the voice behind it, a young scullion girl, new, observant, and alone, who now holds a fragment of power. Cecily gives her a small purse, the first payment in what will become a spiral of bargains and blackmails beneath the stairs. Her hands shake, but relief gives way quickly to dread. One girl knows, more will follow. Evenings grow crisp. The household is tense as rumors of a rival Manors scandal filter in. There, a maid was discovered with child, the lord implicated, the lady demanding the girl's expulsion and the kitchen staff's punishment. Drunken words in the stables hint. At the price of loyalty, Cecily walks with her head down, shunning herself into invisibility. But now, those looks follow her everywhere, some hungry, some cruel, some just tired. Better you than me. Cecily, one says softly, and that is comfort and curse in equal measure. No affair, however clever, can outpace the rhythms of a household forever. The tipping point comes not with a scream or a birth, but in a slipper trinket, fumbled and found by the wrong hand. A secret meeting witnessed by the wrong eyes, a missed midnight when the Lord's absence is counted and questioned. In the morning, the lady's face is pale and set. The steward hastens his step. The kitchen feels suddenly colder, and Cecily realizes the world above the stairs is now peering directly into her own. At that moment, love becomes survival. Cecily knows now that to be caught is to be made an example. Her choices shrink: confess and beg for mercy, flee and risk starvation, or find a way to turn the coming accusation to her own small advantage. The Lord, more afraid than she has ever seen him, promises grand gestures, vows of protection, of taking her away. But she knows, deep in her marrow, that when betrayal comes, it is the lower who always suffers more. This is where hiding becomes truly dangerous, where rumors, bargains, and jealousies coalesce into something that cannot be contained. Soon, someone will speak, and just as surely, the knives will come out figurative or literal. For every pleasure beneath the stairs, there is a reckoning poised above. Next, we'll stay with Cecily as the snare tightens, as allies and enemies reveal themselves, and as the price of hidden love spirals toward a confrontation none can undo. For in the medieval manor, the stairs were never meant to hide anything forever. Someone always opens the door. It starts with a slip. Always a slip, never the great romantic climax the poets crave. Just a dropped pin. A voice too loud in the small hours. A set of muddy footprints on flagstones that should have been clean by dawn. Cecily never even knows, at first, what triggers it. Perhaps it's the ribbon from the lady's sewing basket, found beneath a bench in the dark. Perhaps it's the flicker in the steward's eye as he tallies laundry and finds a nightdress missing, or the careful way the housekeeper no longer meets Cecily's gaze when she serves at table. Whatever it is, the tide shifts, and in a manner ruled by routine. Every small change rings louder than a church bell. The morning after, the whole household feels taut. The servants murmur only when doors are closed, laughter thinner than a knife's edge. Cecily senses eyes on her everywhere, from the scullion girl she'd once bribed, from the laundress who trades favors for secrets, even from the stable. Boys who suddenly seem keener to stick to their own lanes and keep their heads down. The kitchen is cooler, the food tinged with bitterness. The Lord moves through his day with forced nonchalance, lingering a heartbeat too long as Cecily clears his plate, but never quite meeting her eyes for fear of drawing suspicion. The lady, pale and sharp-eyed, circles the mews and gardens, watching, listening. Nobody says a word about the late hours or the slippers left by the hall fire. But everyone knows something is about to give. The first blow lands quietly. The housekeeper, acting on orders she won't name, changes the dormitory assignments. Cecily is moved to a cot next to the window in the coldest corner. far from the steps to the second floor. Her kitchen duties are cut back, replaced by laundry and cleaning tasks on the manor's shadowy periphery. She's paired, always, with the surliest or most forgetful of the servants, those least likely to risk conversation. This is no kindness. It is isolation, a warning, and, perhaps, a test. Will Cecily falter, confess, run? Cecily tries to keep her wits steady. She does her work with silent defiance, praying no sign of fear shows on her face. At night, curled on her straw mattress, she replays every moment, every brush of the Lord's hand, every whisper near the stairs, every time she'd risked a smile at dinner. Was it too bold? Did she leave evidence? Could she count on the Lord's protection? If the truth broke open, doubt seeps in, then shame, then a bitterness colder than the air creeping under the shutters. But the manor does not sleep, and nor do rumors. That night, in the kitchen, a mug drops and shatters, and nobody moves to pick it up. The kitchen boy, flushed and frightened, mumbles of the evil eye, and for a moment, Cecily feels she is staring at a room full of strangers. A few maids, emboldened by fear, start to whisper about how Cecily's luck has changed, about who she's been seen walking with, and why her cheeks are still flushed after a cold morning's chore. When she tries to quiet them, they shrink back, superstition battling with resentment. It always turns. Eventually, a scullery lass sneers, and it's the rest of us who feel the axe when she's done. Upstairs, the pressure builds, in a different way. The lady of the house may act ignorant at first, trusting in routine, but nothing is truly a secret. She watches the Lord's movements, the changes in intimacy or attitude, how he lingers too long at the kitchens, how his mood swings with each moon. The steward, more interested in keeping order than in preserving any heart, takes pride in his discretion, but even he cannot keep a tight ship if the master's games start to spill over. When he begins moving people between bedrooms, tinkering with duty rosters, everyone pretends not to notice. But the dogs sense it and bark at odd hours, and the old cook mutters that there's a chill in the air these nights. It's not enough to hide Body Cecily, and the Lord must hide meaning, too. In a world obsessed with lineage, every act is loaded with risk. A lord who is careless not only courts scandal but threatens his wife's pride, endangers the inheritance of his children, and if church and law get involved, excommunication or worse. Stories from other houses seep in through the minstrels and visitors. The knight who was run through by a jealous husband, the Lord's favorite sent away in disgrace, the entire manor thrown into chaos when a child is born with a face too much. Like the masters, every door has a story, every attic a memory of love turned perilous, and Cecily, each day sharpens her senses, makes her more adept at reading danger. The extra glance from the housekeeper, the new recipe for restorative herbs brewed and forced on the maids each month. She is careful to keep her own body hidden. Stray locks of hair, no stains on the linen, nothing that could betray more than devotion to her work. At the same time, the Lord grows bold. He asks for her in public, compliments her bread too warmly, too often. Above all, he is careless in his need. He lets his eyes linger, and in a world run on silence and implication, that look is as loud as a bell. Inevitably, as the weeks grind on, something shifts. One evening, Cecily finds an anonymous note on her cot, little more than a smear of graphite. "Be careful who sees you." She knows at once the voice behind it, a young scullion girl, new, observant, and alone, who now holds a fragment of power. Cecily gives her a small purse, the first payment in what will become a spiral of bargains and blackmails beneath the stairs. Her hands shake, but relief gives way quickly to dread. One girl knows, more will follow. Evenings grow crisp. The household is tense as rumors of a rival manor scandal filter in. There, a maid was discovered with child. The lord implicated, the lady demanding the girl's expulsion and the kitchen staff's punishment. Drunken words in the stables hint at the price of loyalty. Cecily walks with her head down, shunning herself into invisibility. But now those looks follow her everywhere. Some hungry, some cruel, some just tired. Better you than me, Cecily once says softly, and that is comfort and curse in equal measure. No affair, however clever, can outpace the rhythms of a household forever. The tipping point comes not with a scream or a birth, but in a slipper trinket, fumbled and found by the wrong hand. A secret meeting witnessed by the wrong eyes, a missed midnight when the Lord's absence is counted and questioned. In the morning, the lady's face is pale and set. The steward hastens his step. The kitchen feels suddenly colder, and Cecily realizes the world above the stairs is now peering directly into her own. At that moment, love becomes survival. Cecily knows now that to be caught is to be made an example. Her choices shrink: confess and beg for mercy, flee and risk starvation, or find a way to turn the coming accusation to her own small advantage. The Lord, more afraid than she has ever seen him, promises grand gestures, vows of protection, of taking her away. But she knows, deep in her marrow, that when betrayal comes, it is the lower who always suffers more. This is where hiding becomes truly dangerous, where rumors, bargains, and jealousies coalesce into something that cannot be contained. Soon, someone will speak, and just as surely, the knives will come out, figurative or literal. For every pleasure, beneath the stairs, there is a reckoning poised above. The climax inevitable, dreaded arrives, not with bang, but a chill. On the eve of the festival, with guests streaming in and the largest kitchen fire burning bright, Cecily is summoned to the main hall. The staff is assembled, a tableau of nerves and sickly anticipation. The lady stands, regal beneath her wimple, frost in every word. She asks Cecily to kneel. There have been rumors, the lady says, and in this house we do not abide disorder or betrayal. Have you anything to confess? Cecily's throat closes. Her heart thunders. Should she lie? Could she pin it on someone else? She searches the faces, some stone, some trembling, some eager for relief. She looks at the Lord. He will not meet her eyes. In this moment, it is clear, he will not claim her. She is as alone as she has ever been, her fate balanced on a single breath. In the silence, the household holds its own kind of prayer. What will she say? Who will fall? As Cecily stammers a denial, a scullery boy bursts with nervous energy, eager to testify. He saw something, he says, but it's not for him to judge, only to protect the house. The housekeeper confirms. She saw nothing specific, but the order of the manor must be maintained. Punishment is swift, impersonal. Cecily is stripped of her brooch, her apron, her cot in the quarters. She will be escorted out at first light to answer for her own good and the peace of the house. The servants shudder. The lady coolly thanks all for their honesty and vigilance. The Lord slips out before the meeting ends, the image of power, untouched. In the space of a night, an entire love affair has been buried under the weight of 100 watchful eyes, 1,000 careful silences. Cecily stands by the fire one last time, her hands empty, her name erased from the ledger of the living beneath the stairs. But the story is not yet done. As dawn comes, and Cecily is led with only a sack of clothes to the edge of the manor lands, the rest of the servants are left to adjust to the new balance. Loyalty betrayed, order restored, but trust shattered perhaps forever. Dawn is harshest when it greets you on the wrong side of the manor gate. Cecily's bundle weighs nothing compared to what presses on her shoulders, the silence of those who watched her go, the absence already swallowing her name from gossip, duties, and memory. But as the cockerels crow and she picks her way down the mud-churned track away from what had been home, the manor is far from finished with her. Such banishments might clear a household's conscience, but they rarely end the consequences. After the drama of the night, the air within those stone walls vibrates with unease. Every servant rehearsing their innocence, every steward reviewing the ledger, hoping their own part in the secret will pass unnoticed. Inside the household reels, the lady commands order restored, but the servants' whispers refuse to still. There are too many lessons to ignore. From kitchen to stable, everyone watches their step, careful with words and glances. The message is unmistakable. Crossing boundaries brings punishment, and proximity to power is always perilous. The steward, seeing the chill between noble husband and wife, doubles the work assignments, changes the meal times, commands stricter curfews for maids. Under it all pulses anger, fear, and the shared knowledge that no one here is truly safe. The Lord, outwardly unmoved, grows distant, distracted. He walks the battlements at night, drinks deeper at supper, his voice softer than it has ever been. Those who serve closest learn to take cues from the lady, whose bearings harden with every passing day. Sometimes she inspects the dormitories herself, reading faces, fingers trailing lightly over pillows, hunting for the slightest sign of gossip or disloyalty. She knows her reputation and her children's prospects depend on the sense that she commands here better than her husband ever could. When a kitchen lad whispers too loudly about what happened, she has him transferred to the fields. It is swift and ruthless, a warning sharper than any public scolding. For Cecily, the road is lengthened by memory. She knows she cannot go home. Her old village would bristle with suspicion at an unwed girl in foreign clothes. Instead, she sets her sights on the nearest town, where perhaps she can vanish in the crowds. She is neither the first nor the last to try this. The markets of every medieval city are flecked with faces like hers. Women whose only crime was attracting the wrong attention and being seen by the wrong eyes. At the town gates, she bargains for a night's shelter, trading stories and the faint shine of her schooling with a laundress who, by her look, guesses Cecily's shame without asking. They form a practical alliance, talking little but trading help. The laundress feeds Cecily scraps, and Cecily takes on the dirtiest work in exchange for a corner by the hearth. But the shadow of the manor is stubborn. In these new quarters, the rhythm is different, but the rules just as sharp. Cecily quickly learns to speak little, to answer no questions about her past. She watches how the other women move, how they hush each other when certain local men come by, how charity and suspicion run side by side through every pot of stew. Any woman who kept to herself too closely risked drawing attention, but those who flaunted their graces or invitations soon found themselves blacklisted. Gossip, Cecily realizes, is both the social glue and the quiet knife. Back at the manor, the household nurses its new wound. Absence becomes a test. Who misses Cecily? Who mentions her name? who risks a kind word in her defense. Most are prudent enough to let the silence take hold. The new maid, nervous and brisk, is careful not to smile too brightly at the master or linger alone in any room. Even so, some bristle resentfully under the new discipline. A stable boy jokes bitterly that it's better to love a horse than a lady in this house. At least horses can't talk. When a favorite hound is kicked out of frustration and yelps, a few servants cross themselves, afraid the house is cursed. The lady, now ruling the corridors with an iron will, commissions a new prayer for purity to be read at every Sunday Mass. She donates to the local priory for the cleansing of temptation and hosts visiting clergy with extra care. Her way of reclaiming the moral ground she feels has been repaved with the dirt of betrayal. Rumor has it she even writes to her own mother, seeking counsel on managing a disobedient household and repairing the cracks in her marriage. Her forgiveness, or what passes for it, is reserved for public display smiles for children, gifts to faithful maids, the occasional sharp word for the good of the family. But those who know see a new tension in her jaw, a watchfulness that never slips. The Lord, if he suffers, does so in silence of penance, measured in mist hunts, broken goblets, and the growing distance between his voice and the laughter in his hall. In private, he curses his own foolishness. In public, he sets a face of composure, as if Cecily had never mattered. Yet on certain nights, when the wind howls and the tapestries ripple, he finds himself wandering the dark corridors, pausing by the servants' stair, half haunted by echoes of the past several weeks. The thrill, the fear, the bleak relief of evasion. Was it worth the cost? He tells himself it had to end, that no love is hidden forever. Every powerful man in his father's time had a story. Like this, some survived disgrace, some did not. Meanwhile, Cecily stirs into her new life, one eye always over her shoulder. She quickly realizes that survival is a performance, a careful balance of invisibility, competence, and cautious generosity. She takes up mending work, helps the laundress with town gossip, keeps her head down. She turns each little task into currency, trading clean collars for silence, extra labor for a night inside when winter scours the alleys. She grows wary of men, wary even of kindness, and clings only to those who have something to hide themselves. It isn't long before she sees the cycle repeating. A new chambermaid caught kissing the baker's son in an alley, a matronly neighbor, quietly keeping house for another noble's cast-off child. Some girls disappear overnight. Others seem to fade, their names replaced, their stories woven into the city's anonymous crowd. Cecily, more experienced now, sometimes guides a newcomer, offers a warning, a useful lie. But she is careful. Trust is always rationed. Still, the past pursues her in small ways, a word from a visiting merchant who knew the manor, a glance from a minor cleric that lingers too long, a question asked at a feast. Each time, Cecily manages a plausible answer. But she knows the network of knowledge and memory binding her to the Lord's house is not truly severed. The lady who cast her out, the steward who doctored the books, the kitchen boy who muttered her name in the wrong season, each carries a splinter of her story, sharp enough to cause pain at any distance. Back at the manor, life settles into a new pattern, tense but viable. Another affair soon surfaces, far away in the neighboring barony, and the tale becomes a new caution. The lady's defenses remain high. The Lord's humor does not recover, but he survives without scandal. The servants, driven by fear and habit, grow more watchful but also, in time, more cynical. This house, One whispers, years later, remembers all its mistakes, but never learns. As for Cecily, each change of season draws her further from her old life. Some nights she aches with loneliness, with the memory of a love that could never have lasted. Other nights she is relieved that the risk is past, the game behind her, however bruised. She understands, now with the clarity of pain, that the secret of her survival is not just in never getting caught, but in learning how to live fiercely and steadfastly after being cast aside. For a brief time, it almost seems the manor can return to normal. On the surface, the routines recover: a new maid scrubs the kitchen hearth, the ladies' children resume their Latin, and the Lord's commands return to clipped formality, as though nothing dangerous had ever moved among the rushes. But the semblance of order is only a fragile skin over still turbulent waters. Cecily's absence is felt in 100 invisible ways. The drawn faces of servants who saw her go, pauses in the laughter at dinner, the sudden hush that falls in the long passage to the laundry whenever the ladies' slippers echo down the stone. It's not so easily forgotten by anyone. The housekeeper may have spoken the words that sent Cecily on her way, but she finds herself more irritable, quicker to rage at small mistakes. The chambermaids divide into wary factions, some relieved it wasn't them, urge each other to new heights of caution, while beneath the surface, a dangerous empathy gnaws. We could all be next. Even the steward, who prides himself on cold efficiency, wakes some nights thinking he hears the sound of fabric tearing or a soft sob from the old storeroom, though he knows there is nothing but shadows and mice. Rumor, that ancient wind that blows through every stone, cannot be stopped. When the next feast comes in autumn, gathering for distant kin and neighboring lords, the kitchen staff doubles their vigilance. But servants from other households inevitably trade tales. Did you hear how they manage affairs at Greenford? A girl there hanged herself, couldn't take the shame. Others nod, swapping warnings like tokens. For every account of a clever maid sent away, there's a darker story. A body found floating by the mill, a mutilated face no family would claim. It's no secret that silence is purchased not just by banishment, but sometimes by bribes, threats, or quiet violence. The knowledge weighs on everyone. In the servants' hall, boundaries that once felt communal start to calcify. There are new rules: no speaking above a whisper after curfew, no lingering near the north stairs, no extras served unless granted by higher authority. Gifts and small favors, the coin traded for silence. The handkerchief given in gratitude for a well-placed lie in new significance. Suspicion taints even acts of kindness. When the new maid drops a pitcher, a senior hand says flatly, "Don't expect us to save you." It's meant as advice, but the undertone is fear. Trust is now a currency more rare than gold. Back upstairs, the lady keeps her own counsel, but she too is changed. Before dawn, she wakes with a start, remembering the expression in Cecily's eyes, the hurt, the hope of a single word that never came. There are moments when she wonders if her sternness was truly justified, then quickly snuffs the thought. The world she rules has no room for regret. Family honor, once bruised, must be shielded at all costs. Her letters to her mother grow sharper, more confessional. "Order is paramount," she writes, "but the cost is dearer than I knew." How does one teach loyalty when everyone suspects a trap? The Lord, for his part, is haunted. He walks the halls long after midnight, driven not just by the loss of a lover, but by the bitter taste of his own cowardice. The face in the glass a face people name with deference and fear looks older, regret shadowed deep beneath his eyes. He no longer seeks the company of his staff, avoids the kitchen entirely, and takes his meals in solitude, often silent even among his own kin. The power and privilege that once made the manor feel invincible now seem a brittle thing, breakable as a girl's reputation. Cecily, meanwhile, is piecing together a new sort of life, though the old world will not leave her alone. Word travels on slow wagons and through the boasts of peddlers and craftsmen. There's a runaway maid here, watch out. She ran from scandal. For every act of charity she receives a wedge of bread, a temporary roof. There's an equal dose of suspicion. She adopts new names, learns to style her voice differently, becomes adept at blending in with the crowd. Each kindness is measured, each trust hard-earned. She watches, listens, learns quickly, picking up from the patterns of faces in the tavern or the kneeling women at church who will offer not judgment nor pity, but the practical advice of survivors. Her resilience is built on necessity. She learns to spot a drunk lord's wandering hand, to leave a gathering before tempers boil and accusations start. She guides other girls, teaching them the value of silence, of having a plausible family story, of always keeping a little aside for emergencies. She trades information. News from her old manor for notice about work, or for warning at the first sign her past might catch up. Yet, even here, the risk remains. One wrong confidant, one suspicious official, and the careful structure of her renewed existence could shatter overnight. Back in the manor, the social fabric is still recovering from the tear. The new maid Marjorie's careful, competent, and scrupulously dull. She avoids all unnecessary contact with the lord and shies away from the lady's sharpest stares. Yet there are moments when Marjorie lingers too long at the well or jumps at a loud voice, and the staff can sense that the atmosphere is changed for good. There's no room for error now, whispers one scullion. Even the children are quieter. Where once they ran rockers through the halls, now they play with careful glances, hushed voices, feet soft on rushes. The cost of order has been borne. By all then comes winter, harsh and early. With the biting wind and a meager harvest, tempers stretch thin. A theft in the larder grows into a full investigation, and old resentments surface. No one will admit who brings up Cecily's name, suggesting her troubles brought a curse, or, at the very least, bad luck. The household priest disagrees, reminding them that punishment was delivered and balance restored. But faith cannot smother fear. It only pushes it deeper, where it simmers hotter. Through it all, the lady never cracks. She brings in a new set of prayers, hires visiting clergy to talk of purity and penance, even offers a feast of Saint Agnes for the maids, to bless the start of each new year unsullied. The servants accept, with bent heads, some grateful, some furious, all exhausted. The Lord tries to focus on estate business, but the flowers in Cecily's favorite border are left to die, and when he visits the stables, the horses shy at his approach. There is a ghost between the stairs and the gates, woven from everything unsaid. In her new life, Cecily continues to adapt. She makes herself indispensable, then fadeable. Slowly, the people around her realize she treats them with fairness, never asking more than she gives. One winter night, a neighbor falls ill. Cecily tends her without thought of reward, and for the first time, someone trusts her story. "You're not the only exile," confides the woman, "just the only one still hoping it won't matter." The circle around Cecily grows, but always at arm's length. She is part of the world, yet never truly at home. So it is that the consequences of a lord's secret, once hidden under the stairs, ripple for seasons, for years. The lesson is carved into every face above and below stairs, in the manor's echoing halls and out on the roads where exiles build their patchwork lives. It is a lesson in vigilance, in the price of power, and in the fragile, enduring hope that somewhere, freedom or forgiveness might be possible, though rarely both at once. Spring arrives with deceptive gentleness, rain washing winter's grime from the stonework, new growth pushing through the damp earth in corners where servants rarely sweep. Yet, for all its promise, the changing season brings no easy renewal to the manor, only a shifting of the same pains into new forms. Visitors who stayed through the winter have departed, but their gossip travels with them, a silent poison spreading. From hall to hall, did you hear what happened at the Lord's house? A maid too familiar, a wife too stern. The story, twisted and embellished, returns to the manor in fragments, carried by messengers and merchants who never quite meet the steward's eye when delivering their news. The household, still brittle from the winter's strain, staggers through new tests. A lady's maid falls ill, and immediately rumors circulate that she too has found trouble, though the truth is merely a winter fever. The steward, his nerves frayed by the constant vigilance, grows harsh with petty infractions. Boy thrashed for dropping a platter, an elderly washerwoman docked wages for slow work. Behind this cruelty is fear, fear that order, once broken, cannot be restored. This house, he mutters to the housekeeper over a late-night cup of ale, was solid once. Now I feel it's built on sand. The lady maintains her icy composure, but those who serve her most intimately can see the toll. Her prayers grow longer, her temper shorter. She monitors her husband's movements with the silent efficiency of a jailer, though the Lord himself has retreated so completely into his duties that his wandering seems unlikely. Still, she marks every maid who enters his presence, watches which servant pours his wine. At night, she writes letters burning some before dawn, sending others to distant allies. She is, in her way, rebuilding the walls that Cecily's affair threatened, walls of status, of power, of the ancient privilege that separates noble from common blood. The Lord, for his part, has turned inward. His hunting falters, his archery fails to find its mark. At council meetings, advisors notice how he stares into the fire rather than at maps or ledgers. There are whispers that he drinks too much, though only after the hall is emptied. Once, in a moment of rare carelessness, he asks after the girl who used to tend the south garden, and the silence that follows is so complete you could hear a pin drop on stone. No one answers, no one needs to. The memory of Cecily, banished, but not forgotten, hangs in the air like the ghost of summer perfume, only at night. When the manor sleeps, does the Lord allow himself to wander the corridors as he once did, not seeking pleasure now, but penanza, private ritual of regret? He pauses at the servant's stair, at the storeroom where flour sacks once concealed eager hands. The shadows reveal nothing, offer no absolution. Sometimes he imagines he can hear her voice or catch the scent of the herbs she wore in her pocket. But these are phantoms, as insubstantial as the promises he made and never kept. While the manor wrestles with silence, Cecily battles a different demon, reinvention. In the town, her new identity has begun to take root. She is no longer the manor's disgraced servant, but simply another hard-working woman, a laundress who, keeps to herself, but knows how to ease a neighbor's cough or mend a torn garment. The town, with its endless flow of faces, allows for a kind of forgetting that the manor never could. Here, stories blur, people vanish and reappear without scandal. And a certain threadbare dignity can be maintained even by those who have fallen far. Yet her past is never truly gone. Each market day brings the risk of recognition of visiting noble's retainer, a merchant who once delivered to the manor. Cecily grows adept at spotting danger before it spots her. She changes her hairstyle, alters her walk, even adopts a slight accent that suggests she comes from farther away than she does. When she must speak of her history, she crafts a story that skirts the edge of truth: a distant manor, a family illness, the need to seek new work. These half-truths become a shield, though one she must polish daily lest it crack. Sometimes, in quiet moments, Cecily allows herself to remember what it felt like to be chosen. Desire Devon, if that desire was never truly pure. The Lord's hands, his words, the rare moments when it seemed he might actually defy convention for her sake. She dissects these memories like a scholar examining a text, searching for the moment when love turned to risk, when safety crumbled beneath her feet. Was it the first time she said yes, or was it always inevitable, written in the manor's ancient stones and the blood of those who built it? As summer approaches, bringing heat and longer days, the separation between Cecily's new life and old world begins to fray. A traveling peddler, his cart loaded with ribbons and trinkets, recognizes her at the town well. His eyes widen, his mouth opens, but before he can speak, Cecily presses a finger to her lips. "Please," she whispers, "it's done. Let it stay done." The man, old kind-faced, with daughters of his own, hesitates, then nods. But as he turns away, he murmurs, "They still speak of you, you know. The Lord has changed. The manor is cold." This fragment of news lodges in Cecily's heart like a thorn. She had imagined the household moving on without her, replacing her as easily as a broken dish or a worn-out broom. The thought that her absence might have left a mark is both vindication and fresh pain. That night, she dreams of the manor not as it was, but as it might be. The lord gaunt with regret, the lady fierce with suspicion, the servants walking on eggshells between them. She wakes with tears on her cheeks, unsure if they're for what she lost, or for those still trapped in the game she barely escaped. Back at the manor, change arrives in its own form. The lady, determined to restore the household's reputation and perhaps to fill the spaces where whispers linger, announces new plans. Fresh tapestries for the great hall, a feast for neighboring lords, even talk of rebuilding the east wing. Some see this as renewal, others as a desperate attempt to plaster over cracks in the foundation. The servants, exhausted by months of tension, comply without enthusiasm. Even the youngest maids, who once might have chattered excitedly about new decorations or visiting nobles, move through their tasks with wary eyes, alert to any sign that someone has stepped out of place. The lord agrees to it all with a distracted nod. He has aged, some say not in years, but in spirit. The fire that once drove him to hunt, to feast, to seek pleasure in forbidden corners, has dimmed to embers. At night, he reads old chronicles, stories of kings and warriors who lost everything for love or pride. The household priest, visiting his chambers late one evening, finds him staring at a small wooden carving, a bird, crudely made but once bright with paint, now faded. The priest doesn't ask where it came from. He doesn't need to. He simply offers a blessing and leaves the lord to his solitude. Summer's peak brings crisis of a different sort. A messenger arrives with news that sends the steward rushing to the Lord's study. Cecily has been seen in the town, recognized by not one but several visitors. Worse, there are rumors she speaks openly of her time at the manor, naming names, detailing indiscretions. The Lord's face, already pale from months of indoor brooding, goes white as chalk. "Is it true?" he demands. The messenger stutters that he cannot say for certain, only that the tavern talk is growing louder. It is a lie, of course. Cecily has kept her silence, guarded her past as fiercely as any treasure. But lies have always traveled faster than truth, especially when they feed on fear. The Lord paces his chamber, torn between rage and dread. If these rumors spread, if the lady hears, if neighboring estates begin to whisper anew, the fragile peace of the manor, built on months of careful silence, could shatter in an instant. A decision must be made, one that will affect not just the Lord's comfort or the lady's pride, but Cecily's hard-won second chance. And this time, unlike before, the choice cannot be hidden beneath the stairs or whispered in secret corridors. This time, whatever happens will happen in the light, where everyone can see. When rumor arrives at the manor, it does so as it always has, quietly, yet with just enough noise to set every ear on edge. The steward is first to catch the thread. A merchant woman on the far lane speaks to breezily of your old Cecily, still at the laundry in town, which is more than most exiles can say. The stable boy, eavesdropping from the tack room, watches as a coldness fixes on the steward's face, one that sharpens at the thought that anyone from these walls, once cast out, could still be found, and worse, might still have stories to tell. That evening, the kitchen is thick with anxiety. The old cook, superstitious by nature and long a believer that every scandal leaves a mark, mutters that the return of Cecily's name can only mean unfinished business. A new hired hand, unfamiliar with the house's ghosts, laughs it off until a maid hisses that it's not Cecily's ghost she should fear, but the living, breathing girl herself. Outside, in the gathering dusk, the Lord paces inside his chamber like a prisoner awaiting judgment. He'd almost let himself forget, allowed Cecily's memory to soften into some boyish adventure. But now, with the news of her return so near, his blood chills. If Cecily keeps quiet, the manor's peace can just about hold. If she speaks, if she were to reveal the truth about those late nights, the caresses behind the storeroom door, her sudden disappearance, and even the price the lady herself demanded, the consequences could be ruinous. Unspoken, but known by all, is the fact that noble reputations are never more fragile than when tested by old shame. For the lady, the rumor lands like the crack of a whip. She sees threat in every small act of defiance. In the furtive way a new maid tilts her head when listening to church gossip. In the way the steward seems perpetually distracted. In the way her eldest daughter, clever and watchful, asks odd, sharp questions at dinner. The lady has built her power on authority, maintained her dignity by never showing doubt. To have Cecily's name revive is to risk having the very floor pulled from beneath her feet. In the following days, she becomes tenser, more exacting, finding fault with the smallest stitches, the faintest lapses of posture or propriety. She redoubles her presence at prayers, increases the donations to the local priory, and arranges for traveling minstrels to distract the servants with tales of loyalty, virtue, and grace. All this effort, and still she knows. The real test now isn't within the manor, but without. Meanwhile, in town, Cecily lives her own daily test. Each morning she rises before dawn, hands raw from soap and frost, mind sharp with a vigilance that never fades. She knows she's being watched by the other laundresses, by the innkeeper's wife, and now by the visiting merchant who pauses just a moment too long before greeting her. For Cecily, each interaction is a tightrope. She cannot admit where she's from, at least, not the truth of it or why she left. She responds to every probing question with bland, practiced stories. I worked a manor, yes, but it was far off. I left for my mother's health. Or maybe it was the harvest, or an old promise to kin. She's learned to lie as easily as she once learned to curtsy. But lie though she must, Cecily also learns to listen. And what she hears, between the sluicing of linen and the pounding of sheets, is that her silence gives her power. Women, old and young, come to her with their own secrets, asking advice for avoiding a master's hands, for quieting an unwanted rumor, for feigning ignorance when the bailiff's son gets too bold. With each confidence, Cecily stitches herself deeper into the town's tapestry. She is both outsider and oracle, trusted with small sorrows, resented for having survived what others, perhaps, have not. One evening, as the sun bleeds red through the town's west gate, Cecily is summoned by the innkeeper's wife. "A visitor for you," the woman says, voice pitched just loud enough to make the girls at the back of the room hush and stare. In the tap room sits a man in the livery of the manor steward, older, now eyes tired but unmistakable. Cecily stomach knots. She smooths her apron, nods to the onlookers, and joins him at a side table. He wastes little time on greetings. His words are low and urgent, hands trembling as he lifts his mug. "You've been named by a merchant to the lady. Herself, the Lord worries. The household is frayed as it ever was. They want peace." He leans in. They don't want anyone remembering or talking. Cecily studies his face, measuring each line and shadow. What, she wonders, is his price for this warning? Protection for himself, a hope of buying her silence, or perhaps, against all odds, a flicker of guilt. She answers softly, never letting her eyes stray from his. "I want nothing from your manor. Not coin, not employment, not forgiveness." She pauses, letting the moment stretch. "Tell them I remember how secrets are kept and how betrayal tastes." The steward nods, understanding the transaction for what it is. When he leaves, every eye in the taproom tracks him. By morning, the rumor has twisted again. Some say Cecily is a witch. Some say she's a spy. A few even suggest she plans to return and lay claim to the Lord's good graces. Cecily knows better. She keeps her head low, her circle tighter, trusting only women who have proven, time and again, that outcasts must rely upon each other. Still, she is restless, haunted not so much by fear as by a bitter, breathless hope that somewhere justice could exist. At the manor, the lady receives the steward's report with icy relief and coiled anxiety. She will not speak if she values her own peace, the steward assures. Still, the lady writes to her kin, to trusted priests and a lawyer, ensuring that if Cecily ever does return, does press for compensation or penancy, be met with a wall as high as any built of stone. The Lord, haunted by memory and regret, tries once more to convince himself he bears no blame, tells himself Cecily is only the past, that the servant's contentment is the thing that matters now. But conscience, he finds, is a harder taskmaster than any lady, any priest, any steward, and rumor, once loosed, does not fade so icily. Weeks pass. The summer heat presses against the stone. making tempers even shorter. A scullery maid is caught weeping in the pantry, swearing she saw Seth's spectre near the barn. A village boy claims he heard the tale from a traveling friar and begins spinning a story about the girl who would not be shamed, as a warning against pride, or perhaps as an invitation to rebel against injustice. The manor's staff worry more, cling tighter to duties, watch one another for signs of disloyalty. Cecily sees none of this, but she feels it. She feels it in every cautious kindness, in every warning glance. Sometimes she wonders if her survival is a burden too large, a tale no one truly wants to hear. Still, she remains, and in remaining, she proves that banishment need not mean oblivion. Her very presence, her silence, is a kind of vengeancey refusal to be erased, to be contained under the stairs. It is a lesson to the manor, and to every soul who hears her story through the generations. Secrets hidden become legacies, wounds denied become curses, and the truth, however briefly exiled, returns, in the end, changed, but unbroken. The heat of summer intensifies not only the air, but every nervous glance, every whispered rumor carried from manor to market and back again. By now, the name Cecily is more than a warning or a scandal, she's a test, a symbol, the outline of what might happen to anyone standing too near desire or shame. Word travels between scullery maids in town and stable boys out in the marsh lanes. Some say she's plotting revenge, others that she's married a merchant, a few even that she's joined a band of outlaws in the greenwood. The truth, as always, is less romantic but far more dangerous, because Cecily, against all odds, has endured. Inside the manor, the mood is brittle as the parched grass in the courtyard. The servants' whispers have not faded, only driven deeper, underground, coded in glances and sudden silences. The lady conducts her domain with ruthless grace, wielding piety and discipline with equal authority, but even she cannot ignore the tension. The Lord says little, eating in silence, haunting his study or the fields, rather than risk a word that might splinter what little peace remains. The steward's patience, frayed first by the loss of Cecily, and then by the lady's ever-tightening grip, finally cracks one afternoon when a senior maid dares to ask, after wages withheld since winter. "You want her fate?" He snaps, and the kitchen freezes, every spoon pausing mid-stir. In the town, Cecily is both legend and living reminder. Laundry steams and soap stings her hands, but her mind is always alert, for trouble, for a familiar face, for the pressing in of the world she left. She has made allies among the other women, an old dyer with a mysterious past, a widow who claims to have once worked for royalty, but trust is measured in cautious gestures, never in open confession. Her reputation is paradoxically both armor and target. Stay near Cecily and learn survival, one young worker is told. But don't ask too many questions, or you'll draw her luck. Even among outcasts, there are layers of secrecy. One afternoon, as the sun beats merciless on the cobbled streets, a company of strangers arrives in town. 2 minor knights, a handful of well-dressed merchants, and, trailing them, a youth in the manor livery. They ask after lodgings, Ayland, quietly, after a laundress with sharp eyes and clever hands. Cecily hears her own description passed around before dusk. Instinct tells her to run, to slip away before the web tightens. But something else, a hard-won pride, perhaps, or the fatigue of a person done with running routes, her in place. She tidies her hair, scrubs the day's last stains, and waits. The messenger from the manor finds her near the well, jaw set. "There's trouble at the estate," he mutters, eyes darting as if afraid a ghost will emerge from the shadows. "The lady says to remind you of your silence. She's not above involving the bailiff if you forget yourself. The Lord, he looks ill, refuses meals, asks after things he shouldn't. There's rumor of an inquest, of old debts, of he hesitates, unfinished business." Cecily regards him with the unreadable stillness she's learned since exile. "They cast me out. I owe them nothing," she says. The messenger shrugs, half pleading, half threatening. "They can still make trouble for you, for your friends, for anyone who listens to you." She nods once and turns away, leaving him to the heat and his own uneasy conscience. But the words linger, cold and heavy in the summer sun. What would happen if she spoke, truly spoke, if she named what passed under the stairs? If she confirmed the rumors, if she answered accusation? With accusation, the thought is as intoxicating as it is dangerous. Back at the manor, the tension finally snaps. A letter arrives, sealed with the crest of the Lord's cousins, suggesting, too pointedly to be ignored, that local magistrates are ready to investigate recent disorders in the household. The steward, sweating under the scrutiny, consults. "With the lady, it won't stay buried," he admits. "Either she comes back and clears her name, or someone else will decide what story stands for truth." The lady is livid, not at Cecily, but at the loss of her own narrative. "She is nothing now," she hisses. "The story ends where I wrote it." But power no longer flows in only one direction. The servants mutter more openly, testing the lady's resolve. The Lord, weakened by guilt and memory, loses his temper first at a servant, then at a guest, almost striking the steward before the hall's appalled eyes. The entire manor is held on the knife edge, waiting for a decision that no one dares or desires to make. In the town, the pressure closes like a fist. Twice in 1 week, Cecily returns home to find new graffiti on the laundry house wall, insults and warnings, scrawled by someone with a shaky hand and a bitter heart. More than once, she's followed by a pair of young men emboldened by hearsay and boredom. The dyer warns her to be careful, to stay inside after sundown, to keep water boiling and the back door barred. Yet Cecily refuses to hide, more out of necessity than courage. She talks with the other women about the dangers they all share, men with accusations, priests seeking penance for sins they themselves commit, the ever-present risk of being blamed for every disruption. She tells them, quietly, how quickly a story can turn. A word from the wrong mouth, and all your strength, your skills, your charity will count for nothing. Some listen in awe, others in mounting fear. News travels in both directions. The town's magistrate receives an anonymous note, implicating the manor in a matter of moral disorder, the sort of euphemism covering everything from theft to seduction or worse. That evening, the lady summons the steward, insisting he intervene before officials act, find her, remind her of her place. If she complies, I might allow some charity. If not, make it clear her silence is worth more than her comfort. It is a veiled threat, but one the steward is wearily familiar with. For Cecily, the confrontation comes not with a bang but in the trembling hush of an early morning visit. The steward himself appears, cap in hand. "Don't fight this," he pleads. "Return for a day, face the accusations, and all may be settled quietly." The lady swears it. Cecily meets his gaze and reads, at last, the cracks in his certainty. She weighs her options. To acquiesce is to risk humiliation. To refuse, perhaps to invite ruin. After hours of silent debate, she agrees, but only if she can bring witnesses, women from the laundry, the old dyer, even the local priest who knows her good work. If my name is to be spoken, she says, it will be by those who know what I've truly done. The steward, desperate to resolve the matter before it reaches the courts, agrees. Together, they make the journey back up the long, rutted road to the manor, watched by eyes from hedge and window alike. Inside, shadows gather in every corner. The lady greets Cecily with a strained, icy smile. The Lord cannot meet her eye. The assembled household looks everywhere but at Cecily, each member silently praying not to be drawn into what comes next. The hearing is brief, charged with everything left unsaid. The lady denounces rebellion, slander, and dishonor. Cecily answers with calm simplicity. I took nothing, harmed no one, but was cast out. I ask is to be left to live. The women she brings speak, reluctantly but honestly, of her courage, her honesty, her work. Even the local priesterman, too old to fear the lady's anger, states, she is no sinner by my reckoning, only a survivor. When it ends, there is no sudden forgiveness, no grand reckoning. The lady relents, only enough to offer coin for Cecily's silence and departure, laced with threats should she ever speak again. The Lord, breaking at last, apologizes under his breath as Cecily leaves for good. The servants, watching from kitchens and corridors, understand that the story has not ended, merely been forced into new shapes. New stories, new secrets, beneath the stairs. Cecil returns to town free, but changed. Her name, once a weapon, becomes a warning and a banner both. Proof that survival is possible, that truth cannot be wholly buried, that even in a world ruled by punishment and secrecy, one woman's refusal to be erased can upend an entire household. But the dance is not yet done. With gossip, a permanent echo, and power always recalibrating in the shadows. The legacy of forbidden love, betrayal, and survival continues, hinting at new alliances, new tests, and, perhaps, a fragile kind of peace for those who dare to tell their own story. The world after Cecily's reckoning is quieter, but uneasy at the manor for a time. The air feels vacuumed of scandal, the halls swept cleaner, voices softer, every task executed with new, brittle precision. The lady's rule stands unchallenged to perfection, built from fear rather than love, and most in the household comply with desperate, grateful relief. It's done now, is the message on every stiff back and averted gaze, yet the echo of what happened reverberates far beyond the walls. The rituals of discipline and piety, meant to reassert order, now function as much to keep ghosts at bay as to prevent new missteps. It's possible, finally, to see how forbidden love doesn't end with banishment or coin, but lingers in every corridor, too narrow to forget. The younger maids have memorized the lesson. For months, perhaps years after, not a girl dares linger alone in a corridor or answer a gentle word from a steward without 3 witnesses and a hand folded primly on her apron. There are fewer accidents, less laughter, and at least superficially less reason for the lady to suspect anything at all. But inside that prim order, alliances simmer, cold and quiet. If a favor is asked, the answer is always measured, never eager. Trust has been traded for vigilance. Everyone is safer, and yet no one truly is. The steadiest hands and brightest eyes belong to those who saw Cecily's fate and swore in their private prayers, "That will not be me." Down in the village, the story of Cecily's return, her dignity, and her quiet defiance flickers from mouth to mouth. Young girls whisper it at the well, reimagining her as everything from a wronged heroine to a cunning survivor. The tale, as stories always do, shifts in the telling. Sometimes Cecily is said to have bested the lady at her own game. Sometimes it is the lord who fell into disgrace. Sometimes the manor itself is spoken of as cursed, haunted by her memory in the years to come. For as long as she remains in town, Cecily is a living reminder that power can be resisted, even if only with silence. The women around her remember. Some are emboldened, many are cautioned, and a few those who knew shame before begin, at last, to compare scars instead of hiding them. Rumor turns quietly to ritual. In the manor kitchens, an old custom re-emerges. Each time a new girl is hired, an older one traces a cross over her palm with flour before dawn. A superstitious blessing caught between real fear and half-remembered comfort. Be wise, don't let his eye linger. Never close the door behind you. Each rule is a code, a way to avoid Cecily's fate. For every young footfall behind the stairs, there are 10 cautious hearts, all of them carrying the memory of how easy it is to fall from favor, or how fickle favor really is. The steward is changed, too. Though he remains loyal to the household, his sharpness has been dulled. In quieter moments, he wonders whether the cause was ever worth the cost, whether the security of the manor's name means as much as sleep. Without remorse or conversation untainted by secrets, he notices the servants no longer come to him with small disputes, and that when he walks the grounds, children greet him with reserved politeness, but never the eager trust of before. It is a household preserved, but never again one at peace. The lord ages more rapidly. He resumes his duties, overseeing accounts, riding out with tenants, attending the occasional feast, but his authority now wears a crack, visible only to those who know where to look. He is quick to anger, slow to trust. Old friends find him withdrawn, unable to meet their eyes, without an edge of suspicion. He no longer lingers above the servants' halls, nor seeks diversion in stolen moments. Occasionally, his gaze drifts to the window, searching the road to town, but he never says Cecily's name. Even in the confessional, if the lady has regrets, she buries them deep beneath new traditions, feasts for the priest, stricter lessons for her daughters, an annual gift to the church for the sanctity of the house. Her pride is intact, but brittle. She demands absolute loyalty, and for a while she receives it. Yet she, too, understands the skirt of betrayal is always near. Every uneasy truth, every child who grows old enough to see past the rules, risks opening old wounds. When a young maid stumbles on the stairs during Lent, the lady's quavering fury surprises even herself. She orders days of fasting, extra prayers for chastity and prudence, her voice sharp with echoes. Let Cecily's lesson hold. Rumor, memory, and ritual, these become the new building blocks of the manor. But time has its own way of shifting the truth. Years later, an aging laundress confides to a child with quick hands and wide eyes. We lost something when she left, maybe innocence, maybe just the only person who dared to say no. The child remembers. She learns to watch, to wait, to step lightly when the world feels wrong. She will become, in turn, another keeper of secrets, another quiet mentor. Cecily's legacy endures, not as scandal, but as a blueprint for the careful, coded resistance that keeps generations of servant girls alive. Outside the great house, the world changes. Years pass, faces are replaced. But whenever a girl enters service or a rumor stirs of favor traded in the dark, the story reappears. There is always a legend of the one who would not be broken, and there are always young hearts measuring their own worth against a memory that no punishment quite erased. Cecily herself eventually moves on, either to another town, or perhaps to a marriage of her own, forged less out of romance than the solid, necessary desire for shelter and respite from judgment. In her home, she keeps counsel with the city's outcasts, guiding, helping, sometimes just listening to those others would rather not see. What she does not allow is the world's shame to become her own. Her story, repeated to daughter or friend, or stranger in need, never loses its edge, but it gains, every year, a trace more hope. In every place power and vulnerability exist together. Cecily's shadow walks. Other manors take to locking certain doors, or keeping closer records, or enforcing rules designed as much for appearances as for protection. But beneath these changes, the dance continues. Every generation brings new Cecilys, new betrayals, new chances for courage or cruelty. The difference, now, is that the memory of what happened is harder to erase. Truth, once spoken and not destroyed, finds a way back, again and again. And so, beneath the stairs or in the open daylight, love is still hidden, still dangerous, but never truly without witness. The story goes an lesson, a warning, a quiet anthem sung by those too often dismissed or cast out. The manor, deep down, knows it has been changed for good. Above and below stairs, the reckoning continues. Every rumor a small act of remembrance. Every prayer for safety a silent nod to Cecily and all who dared to survive. Unbroken time, it is said, wears away the hardest stone and the sharpest memory. In the years after Cecily stood before the manor's reckoning, life for those she left behind did not return to what it was. The manor grew quieter, leaner, older, despite its fresh plaster and newly planted roses. But Cecily's story, and all the hidden loves like hers, persisted in ways grand and subtle, folded into the bone of the house, whispered in the dark across centuries, remembered as warning, as comfort, as the first stubborn sprout in a garden. No master could control. The youngest maids, children when Cecily was sent away, carried the story in their marrow. To one, it was a caution. Never let the Lord notice. Never take a favor. Keep your heart where none can see. To another, it was proof that the world could crack open and reorder itself, if not with justice, then with a kind of rough equilibrium found in the survival of the wrongly cast out. Songs emerged, tuneless and half-remembered, of the girl who kept her dignity before a scornful house and never asked to return. Mothers taught their daughters to tie their aprons a little tighter, to keep two busy corners, to trade stories before secrets. Above stairs, the family line persisted, though the lord and lady never spoke openly about what was lost. The lady older, never quite content, sometimes found herself awake in the dead of night, fingers curled tight around her rosary, wondering if somewhere some priest was praying for both the lost and the banished. Her daughters married well, or so it was said, but learned early the price for stepping past unseen boundaries. The Lord's reputation never fully recovered, though he kept power. There was a visible chill to the way he was spoken of at court. A house with a long memory, nobles would murmur over wine, best not to look too closely there. The story moved beyond even those walls. Over the generations, households everywhere adopted silent codes, rotating chores, always working in pairs, shifting women between houses during festival times. Laws grew stricter for the poor, but also, slowly, for the powerful. Lords learned to guard their appetites. Some watched their sons more closely. Others dispatched daughters to distant relatives at the first whisper of trouble. Priests preached honor, and the best stewards kept careful note of every absence, every extra coin spent on a sudden journey. What no one ever admitted aloud was that these codes, this vigilance, came not from abstract morality, but from the lived memory, the ache and resilience of women like Cecily, mutely resisting, then enduring, then remaking the world outside the manor's shadow. Cecily herself, though time moved her far from the old estate, became a fixture in her new community. Some said she ran a laundress's house, fair and strict, yet kind to those cast off by others. Others whispered she married late, kept secrets, and adopted every stray girl who knocked at her door with empty hands. She never returned to the manor. She lived with her face to the market, her back never unprotected, and her story became a kind of blessing for those who followed down assurance that shame need not end in ruin, that survival itself can unmake the curse of silence. As towns and cities grew, more and more women and men found themselves holding pieces of this legacy. Parlors, kitchens, workrooms bustled with old warnings, echoed in new tongues. The house is always watching. Secrets can be poison or power. When scandals erupted, lovers caught, reputations bruised, marriages suddenly arranged, was the old rhythm, the old duality. Swift punishment for the powerless, secret deals for the elite. But bit by bit, those expected to be silent learned when and how to speak. The stories became sharper, the warnings clearer, the alliances better hidden but more resilient. By the time memory is history and the manor is no longer home but heritage. Cecily's fate and those like hers have seeped into law, literature, and the social contract. Novels and plays retell old scandals with fresh sympathy. Laws about employment, reputation, even inheritance, slowly accountive, never fully for the impact of such betrayals. Social change is glacial, halting, incomplete. But the fact remains, what was once hidden under the stairs is, through rumor and memory, woven into the foundation of a more complicated, but also more humane world. Sometimes, in the stillness of a late winter night, an aging woman in a village not far from Cecily's town tells a new maid the old story. She speaks quietly. After the candles are out, a lord once tried to keep his lover below stairs, thinking the stone would shield his secret. But the stone heard everything, and when the truth came out, it changed us all. The girl, listening, wraps herself tighter in her blanket. She knows the world is less kind than the story pretends, but also that maybe it is less cruel than it used to be. She learns, from Cecily's echo, the old lesson, to be wary, but not to bend, to survive, but when it's safe, to speak. For above all, that's what changes in the end. The manor persists. Love still flares in forbidden corners. Betrayal is always a risk. But no story can remain fully secret forever, not once, not now, not in the future. With each telling, each rumor, each survivor, the old rules erode a little more, replaced by something more lasting than stone. The testimony of those who endured, the memory of what it cost, and the hope that their pain was not in vain. And so, the story of lords and lovers, of secrets hidden and revealed, is never just about passion or scandal. It is the ancient, ongoing drama of power meeting vulnerability, of compassion sparring with pride. of how one person's pain, if not erased, can ripple out to shelter and teach countless others. What happened under those stairs may have begun as love and ended as punishment, but its consequences echo forward, shaping the very world we inherit. You walk away now, the last echoes of Cecily's tale swirling behind you. The candles gutter out in the old Manor's kitchen. Somewhere in a modern city, a lost soul reads a warning, whispers a story, finds the courage to demand better. The door under the stairs remains, but now, at last, the light comes in. Thank you for walking this long, shadowed journey through secrecy, punishment, power, and survival.